2,000 years after the Battle of Yavin, the Jedi and the Force are little more than a distant memory. A scavenger spaceship, crewed by Ronan Vex and Cara Ryn, stumbles upon a long-forgotten sector of the universe, entering the atmosphere of a planet known only as the Sixth in a system of 11. As the ship breaks through the thick fog encircling the planet, Ronan and Cara gaze in stunned silence at the sight before them, a planet entirely covered by a sprawling cityscape that stretches endlessly in every direction. Towering skyscrapers of durasteel and glass pierce the sky like needles, some reaching so high they vanish into the haze of the upper atmosphere. Cara, still awestruck, finally breaks the silence. "What is this place? There must be loads of valuable finds here." Ronan shakes his head. "I have no idea, but we found it, so it's ours. We'd better find somewhere to land and investigate. We're going to be rich." They eventually settle the ship near an immense temple structure nestled within the cityscape. The building stands tall, with 5 distinct spires reaching into the sky, the central spire towering above the rest. "This looks like a good place to start," Ronan says. Cara grins. "I can feel the credits lining my pockets already." As they approach the massive entrance of the temple, Ronan conducts a full scan of the area with a handheld device. "No life signs at all, baby. It's all ours." They step inside, and Ronan starts brushing dirt and vines away from an old, faded sign. Cara leans in and reads the ancient inscription. It's written in an old language, something about Jedi and the planet Coruscant. Ronan shrugs dismissively. "Never heard of either, but it's ours now." They begin gathering items of value near the entrance of the temple. Cara suddenly draws Ronan's attention to a remarkable find. "Look what I've got." She reveals a rusty old 3PO series protocol droid. "Wow, that's some ancient tech," Ronan says, eyeing it. "Think it still works? Let's boot it up. It could be worth some serious credits." The droid's internal systems whir to life, its eyes flickering on. "Hello, I am a 3PO series protocol droid. How can I be of service?" Ronan and Cara take a cautious step back, exchanging astonished looks. "Now that's some next-level stuff," Cara murmurs. "What should we ask it?" A sly grin spreads across Ronan's face. "It'll know where all the valuable stuff is. Let's start with the basics. Hey, droid, where are we?" The droid responds, "You are on the planet Coruscant, in the Jedi Temple." Cara frowns in confusion. "What are the Jedi?" "They were the keepers of balance and order in the galaxy for thousands of years," the droid replies. Ronan scoffs. "Well, they didn't do a very good job, did they? The galaxy is about to be overrun by the Voidborn. And where are these keepers of balance now? Nowhere. No one is coming to save us." "Stop your whining," Cara snaps. "Always going on about impending doom. Let's focus. Droid, tell us more about the Jedi. What could they do? How powerful were they?" The droid launches into a detailed explanation of the Jedi, their battles against the Sith, and their legendary weapon, the lightsaber. The two scavengers listen, captivated. "Who was the most powerful Jedi in history?" Ronan asks, leaning in. The droid pauses, as if accessing long-buried files. "There was one Jedi whose power far surpassed any before him. He saved the balance of the universe countless times. His name was Soren Warde, the Jedi who could control time and space, abilities unheard of within the Order. Some of the records are corrupted. Little else is known about Saurin." Ronan and Cara exchange a look of astonishment. "Now that sounds like someone who could help, especially with the galaxy on the brink of being swallowed by the Voidborn," Cara says softly. At that moment, the scene shifts to a darkened cave. A man sits in a meditation pose wearing green Jedi robes and a mask, with swirling emerald energy radiating from him. Soren Warde is being called upon by the Force once more. Soren Warde stirred from the depths of his long meditative trance, his muscles stiff, his mind slowly returning to clarity. He removed his mask. The cave around him, once alive with the vibrant energy of the Force, now felt hollow and still. He blinked, his eyes adjusting to the dim light filtering through cracks in the ancient stone walls. He could feel it immediately. Something was wrong. The weight of the galaxy's imbalance pressed down on him, heavy and undeniable. The burden of responsibility settled on his shoulders. a familiar companion. The Force had called him back, and though he had no clear understanding of the current threat, he instinctively knew it was as dire as any he had faced before. Soren's first thoughts drifted to his past, to the life he had once known, so bright, so full of promise. He recalled her face, his love, a time when hope and possibility seemed endless. But that life was gone, and with a deep breath, he pulled himself away from the memories. He checked the year on his wrist device, expecting a few decades at most to have passed during his deep meditation. But as the numbers displayed on the screen, his heart sank. 2,000 years, 2 millennia had slipped by, and the universe he once fought to protect had been lost to time. He stood motionless, the reality sinking in. The Force really does have a sense of humor, he muttered under his breath, regaining his composure. There was no time for grief, no space for shock. The Force had reawakened him for a reason, and it would soon reveal why. Moving quickly, Saurin began booting up the systems embedded in the ancient technology within his ship. The small vessel, hidden deep within this forgotten cave, was one of the last remnants of the once mighty Jedi Order. As the computers flickered to life, Saurin began scanning for any data that could give him an understanding of what he had awoken into. The silence was soon broken by a sharp, continuous beeping. Data streamed in rapidly across the screens, but the images and signals made no sense to him. Where once the universe had been a tapestry of stars, planets, and life, the readings now showed only vast stretches of darkness, voids where entire systems should have been. "This can't be right," Saurin whispered, tapping at the screen in disbelief. "What happened to the galaxy?" His mind raced, trying to comprehend the devastation, but the only clear answer was that the Force had drawn him back for a reason. Something was out there, something powerful and dark, and it was destroying everything. And Saurin, for all his mastery of the Force, had no idea where to begin. The Warden. He breathed suddenly, the thought forming like a beacon in the back of his mind. Soren Warde sat in the cockpit of his small ship, frowning at the flickering console. His repeated attempts to get the systems operational had failed. The ship, buried deep within the cave he had chosen centuries ago as the perfect place to remain hidden, was as lifeless as the galaxy seemed to be. He stared at the unresponsive controls and sighed. There was only one option left. He had to climb out. The irony wasn't lost on him. "You really do have a sense of humor, don't you?" he muttered to the Force, echoing his earlier thought. This cave, hidden halfway down a massive sinkhole on the planet Mandalia, had once been his sanctuary, the perfect place to never be found. Now, it was his prison. Gathering his things, he packed what little he could carry. His lightsaber, a few survival tools, and some data chips, relics from another time. He cast one last glance at the ship, knowing it might never fly again, before turning toward the cave's entrance. As he approached the exit, Saurin paused for a moment, marveling at the sight before him. The sinkhole had its own thriving ecosystem. Vines stretched upward toward the faint sunlight, trees grew along the walls, and strange plants dotted the ground, thriving in this hidden world. It was a far cry from what he remembered. When he first arrived, the sinkhole had been barren, but after 2 millennia, life had taken over. Saurin smiled softly to himself. Life always finds a way. Taking a deep breath, he stepped out onto the cliff edge. "Onwards and upwards, I suppose," he muttered, looking up at the towering walls of the sinkhole. The climb would be long and dangerous, but there was no other way. Hours passed as he ascended, his muscles burning from exertion. Saurin had once been used to such physical challenges, but 2,000 years had taken their toll. Still, he pushed forward, his grip firm and steady as he pulled himself higher. The Force, ever his guide, flowed through him, lending him strength when he needed it most. Finally, he reached the surface. Pulling himself over the edge, Saurin expected to see the dense forests that had once surrounded the sinkhole, but what greeted him was something else entirely. The land was barren, scorched. The trees were gone, the vibrant greenery replaced with desolation. The sky above was a dull gray, the air thick with dust and ash. He turned back to the sinkhole below, where life still thrived and confusion clouded his mind. How is that even possible? He murmured to himself. The stark contrast between the lush ecosystem within the sinkhole and the devastation on the surface made no sense, but there was no time to dwell on it. The galaxy had changed, and he needed to find out why. Soren activated his wrist device, taking readings from the planet's surface. The sensors beeped softly, showing signs of several large settlements nearby. He narrowed his focus on the closest one. It wasn't far, perhaps a few days' walk. He glanced at the barren wasteland again, then down at his supplies. Checking his water reserves, Soren realized he had just enough to make the trek. With the landscape so harsh and unforgiving, he would have to ration carefully. Adjusting his pack, he started walking, his boots crunching against the scorched ground. Each step echoed in the silence of the wasteland. He didn't know what awaited him at the settlement, but he knew one thing. The galaxy was in ruins, and he was running out of time to figure out why. The Force had called him back for a reason. Whatever darkness now gripped the galaxy, Soren Warde would face it, just as he had countless times before. As Soren trudged across the endless wasteland, his eyes caught sight of something barely visible on the horizon, a small camp, half hidden by the heat haze rising from the scorched ground. Expecting it to be one of the Mandalorian giants' camps, he approached cautiously. But as he drew closer, he realized something was off. The camp was far too small, its makeshift shelters clustered in a pitiful attempt to shield its inhabitants from the harsh elements. Suddenly, a ripple of alarm swept through the camp. Several figures, barely more than silhouettes at first, emerged from the tattered shelters, clutching worn tools and scavenged weapons. Soren could see now that they were a diverse group, a mix of species from across the galaxy. Each of them wore tattered rags, their faces gaunt and eyes hollow from malnutrition. Their appearances betrayed a life of hardship, one that likely held little comfort or security. The beings stumbled forward, but as they drew near, their eyes locked onto Soren, and they froze, their expressions twisting into terror. "No, please!" One of them, a wiry Twi'lek, cried out, his voice raw with fear. "Spare us! Don't take our souls!" Others joined in, pleading and backing away from Soren, their voices trembling. Some fell to their knees, bowing in desperation, their bodies shaking. Soren stood there, motionless, his mind reeling. He opened his mouth to speak, to reassure them, to tell them he meant no harm. He raised his hands, trying to appear non-threatening, but the sight of his raised hands only made their fear spiral into hysterics. "Stop, please, just stop," he said. But they shrieked in response, clutching each other and scrambling away, as though he were the harbinger of death itself. Soren closed his eyes, exhaling in frustration. "Only one thing for it," he murmured. Reaching out with the Force, he whispered a phrase under his breath, and the world around him fell silent. The camp was frozen in time, the frightened faces before him locked in their expressions of terror. With careful steps, Soren approached one of the group, a human man whose fear had etched deep lines across his face. Soren gently placed a hand on the man's head and closed his eyes, letting the Force flow through him and into the man's mind. Soren pulled his hand away, eyes wide in shock. "How can this be?" he whispered. "It's impossible." Soren Warde stood frozen, not in time, but in the crushing weight of revelation. His mind reeled, struggling to process the dark vision that had seeped into him through the connection with the frightened old man. "It's me," he stammered, the words barely audible. Around him, the refugees remained locked in time, expressions of terror frozen on their faces. Soren took a trembling breath, then settled into a meditative pose on the ashen ground. He closed his eyes, willing calm to wash over him as he tried to make sense of the chaos swirling within. In the darkness of his mind, the visions replayed, each one sharper, more vivid. Whole planetary systems swallowed by shadow, reduced to barren wastelands like the one around him. He felt the despair of countless lives as their souls were ripped away, leaving only hollow vessels where life once thrived. And at the center of this nightmare, casting its shadow over everything, him. The image burned behind his eyes, unwilling to fade. It wasn't the green-robed Jedi Sentinel he knew himself to be. This was something far darker, a twisted version of himself clad in black from head to toe, eyes burning with a terrifying intensity. In each hand, he wielded a blood-red lightsaber, the very symbol of the darkness he had sworn to oppose. He led them, the Voidborn, an army of beings who wore the same dark armor, their faces hidden beneath black hoods, each brandishing a red lightsaber. They marched like shadows across the galaxy, a tide of despair, extinguishing light and life wherever they went. Soren's eyes snapped open, his breath shallow. How could this be? He was bound to the Force, the light, the ancient calling of balance. Yet here he had seen himself, an image of corruption and destruction, leading the Voidborn. In his heart, a whisper of doubt crept in, something he had rarely felt. Could he in some distant future have fallen to this darkness? He took another steadying breath, forcing the doubt back. He would not believe it. Not yet. The Force would not have awoken me for this if I were doomed to be. His voice faltered. The image was too potent, too real. Saurin glanced back at the frozen refugees. Perhaps, he thought, these people had reason to fear me. They too had seen glimpses of the Voidborn while escaping the horrors that plagued their galaxy. And with the Force still pulsing around him, he could sense that the Voidborn were far more than a nightmare. They were real, sweeping across the galaxy like a dark flame. The refugees still in their frozen stances, their faces painted with terror, but Saurin knew he couldn't leave them like this. Reaching out with the Force, he softened its grip, releasing them from their suspended state. As the power faded, the beings staggered, their terror reignited as they looked up at him. But Saurin held out a hand, his face calm, resolute. "Please," he said. His voice boomed with the power of the Force filled with urgency. "I am not the one you fear. I am here to help." A cautious silence fell over the camp as the refugees stared at him, torn between their fear and the glimmer of hope in his words. "What are you?" one of them finally asked, his voice trembling. "Are you not the master of the Voidborn?" Saurin shook his head, and in his gaze there was only determination. "I am a Jedi," he said, feeling the weight of those words more than ever. "And I am here to stop them." The Twi'lek and the others watched him with wary eyes, but Saurin could see a shift, a crack in the wall of their fear. They began to nod one by one, their expressions softening just a fraction. Turning his gaze to the horizon, Saurin clenched his fist. The Voidborn were real, and if he was somehow bound to this darkness, then he would face it head-on. Whoever or whatever his twisted doppelganger was, he would ensure that his path did not end in shadow. With the Force as his guide, he would fight against the darkness, even if it meant facing himself. In the days that followed, Saurin lingered at the camp, absorbing everything the refugees could tell him. Their stories painted a grim picture, a galaxy changed beyond recognition. With each tale, he felt the weight of 2,000 years of history bearing down on him. The Jedi were nothing more than myths, their legacy erased so thoroughly that not a whisper of their order remained in this twisted future. This realization struck him deeply. He had devoted his life to the Jedi ideals, had fought with every ounce of his being to protect the balance of the universe. And now, nothing he once cherished seemed to remain. Saurin closed his eyes, fighting against the ache of loss. He wished Tevara were here. She had always been the one to help him find perspective in moments of doubt, her words a steady anchor in the storm. But Tevara, like everything else, was lost to the passage of time. "It's just me now," he reminded himself, taking a steadying breath. He turned his focus back to the refugees' accounts, trying to piece together the rise of the Voidborn. They described the relentless spread of an army that engulfed entire star systems, its legions wielding weapons of red plasma, primitive versions of lightsabers. The mere mention of the color made his heart clench, but it was the leader of this dark force who haunted him most. Every account was the same. "He looks just like you," one of the refugees had whispered, glancing at Saurin with a mix of awe and fear. Black robes, like a shadow across the stars. A Mon Calamari elder, a survivor of one of the first Voidborn invasions, recounted the horrors he'd witnessed. They came in silence at first, like a storm on the horizon, but once they descended, the ground shook with marching feet. The sky turned black and souls. I saw them, fleeing their bodies, ripped away like dust in the wind. His voice cracked. By the time I escaped, my world was empty. Soren struggled to contain his horror. The destruction sounded like nothing he'd ever encountered. No Sith he had known had unleashed such devastation, such complete desolation. The refugees pointed him toward the next settlement where he might find a ship, but they warned him it was no place for strangers, much less someone who bore such an uncanny resemblance to the Voidborn's leader. Soren nodded, thanking them for their guidance. "It's not safe," an elderly Twi'lek woman added, casting a worried glance. "They don't trust outsiders. They've seen too many betrayals." Soren offered a reassuring smile. "I'm used to dealing with distrust. I'll be fine." He turned to leave, but paused, meeting the refugees' gazes one last time. "Thank you for what you've shared, and for helping me understand what's at stake." With that, he set off across the barren plains, his thoughts churning. The planet's desolation spread like a bleak landscape, the remnants of once flourishing worlds now stripped bare. In the far distance, he spotted the faint glimmer of the settlement, a harsh, metallic glint under the dim sun. As he walked, he felt a pull in the Force, a quiet whisper guiding his steps. It was a reminder that despite the chaos and darkness, the Force still had a purpose for him. Whatever the Voidborn represented, whatever connection they had to him, he would find the answers. And if he was indeed linked to this devastation, he would stop it, no matter what the cost. The command room was shrouded in shadow, cold and silent save for the ragged breathing of Darth Sidious and Darth Vader. The Emperor's skeletal hands gripped the armrests of his throne, his gaze fixed on the heavy doors. The silence was unnatural, the type of void only profound power could create, and it was closing in. A faint green glow appeared beneath the door. It pulsed and grew, like the slow approach of an inevitable storm. And then the doors slid open, and Soren Warde stepped into the chamber. Cloaked in deep green robes, his face hidden behind a mask, he exuded a presence that felt ancient, otherworldly. The air itself seemed to tremble with his arrival. Beside Sidious, Darth Vader drew his crimson lightsaber, its hum piercing the silence. But Soren barely glanced at the weapon as he continued his steady march forward, his footsteps echoing like a funeral drum. There was a force emanating from him that went beyond any Jedi or Sith discipline. A power, older, deeper, something primal. "Stay back, Jedi," Vader warned, his voice resonant and unyielding, "or you will meet your end." Soren paused, tilting his masked face to regard the two Sith. "The end is indeed here, Vader," he said, his voice smooth and resonant, reverberating with a timbre that spoke of vast knowledge, vast suffering. "But it's yours, not mine." Darth Sidious, his face twisted with desperation and rage, forced himself to stand, summoning the full strength of the dark side. Lightning crackled at his fingertips, and he threw it forward with a scream. The room blazed with blue and white, bolts arcing like deadly vipers toward the green-robed Jedi. Soren merely raised a hand, and in that instant time itself seemed to freeze. The lightning hung in midair, suspended and impotent. Sidious's mouth twisted in horror as he watched, helpless, his power turned to nothingness by a gesture. For the first time, his Sith lightning, an attack that had laid waste to enemies countless times, was no more than a flicker in Soren Warde's grasp. The masked Jedi stepped closer, allowing the Force lightning to dissolve into harmless sparks. "You have spent your lives twisting the Force to serve your own desires, believing yourselves untouchable." His voice was calm, yet it resonated with the weight of judgment. "But the Force is not yours to control, Sidious. It exists beyond you, beyond the Sith, beyond even the Jedi. It is life itself, and you have twisted it into death for too long." Soren released his hold over them. Sidious staggered back, his face pale and drained. Beside him, Vader moved, raising his lightsaber in a powerful sweep toward Soren's neck. In the blink of an eye, Soren's own green blade ignited, parrying Vader's strike with ease. He moved so fluidly that his blade was almost a blur, a flash of emerald light against Vader's crimson. The duel between Vader and Soren was brutal and swift. For every blow Vader landed, Soren's counter was faster, more precise. He struck with deadly intent, his power honed not in rage, but in something sharper, colder. judgment. With a final blow, he swept his saber in a tight arc, sending Vader's weapon spinning from his hand and leaving the Dark Lord defenseless. With a flick of his wrist, Lord Vader was frozen in place. Soren gave him a dark glance. "You wait right there. I'll be back for you." Soren turned his attention back to Sidious, who now looked small and huddled in his throne, eyes wide with terror. "You cling to power, Sidious," Soren continued, his tone harsh. "You have slaughtered, manipulated, and stolen life to extend your reign. But the Force doesn't bow to the whims of the Sith. It has its own balance, its own justice." Sidious could feel his life force draining as though an invisible weight was pressing down on him. His own darkness turned back upon him, magnified. He gasped, his voice ragged. "I am the Dark Lord of the Sith. I am the Emperor." But Soren's gaze was implacable. "You are nothing, Sidious, a shadow who clung too tightly to the flame." The air around Soren grew brighter, his green aura intensifying as he raised his lightsaber high. His voice echoed, resonant and full of power. "For every life you have destroyed, for every soul you have twisted, your judgment has come." With a final step forward, he brought his blade down in a sweep of green light. The energy enveloped both Sith Lords, freezing them in place as they withered under the immense weight of the Force. Sidious's scream echoed through the ship, a sound that grew faint as his dark energy was consumed, undone by the very power he had corrupted for so long. As the light faded, the room fell silent, leaving only the whisper of Soren's robes as he turned and departed, leaving behind nothing but the ashes of a dark empire. In the dimly lit cantina on the wasteland planet of Mandalorian, Ronan Vex and Cara Ryn lounged at their table, enjoying the high of their latest haul. Looting Coruscant's ancient ruins had turned up their biggest score yet, and now they were content to revel in their success. Cara flashed Ronan a mischievous grin, her eyes glinting with excitement. "So, who's getting the first of many rounds?" she teased, arching an eyebrow. Ronan chuckled, meeting her gaze. "Why stop at one? Let's open a tab," he replied with a grin. As the hours wore on, the pair's celebration only escalated. Cara, in high spirits, had danced on the tables more than once, ignoring the repeated warnings from the cantina's burly security droids. But with the credits flowing freely, they were tolerated, and the night continued as a blur of laughter, loud toasts, and exaggerated tales of their exploits. During a rare pause to catch their breath, they noticed a sudden hush fall over the cantina. Ronan furrowed his brow, sensing an odd tension in the air. Cara nudged him, her eyes fixed on the entrance. "Look," she whispered, tilting her head toward the shadowed figure gliding toward them. A cloaked and masked figure in dark green robes was moving through the crowd, every step parting patrons in his wake as if they instinctively felt his presence. As he approached their table, Cara and Ronan exchanged a look, eyes wide, with a mix of disbelief and amusement. "Nope, no way," Cara whispered, shaking her head in stunned recognition. But before they could get another word out, the figure reached their table and leaned in close. In a calm, steady voice that carried a strange weight, he said, "I'm told you have a ship, and that you're willing to take passengers off-world if the price is right." Ronan barely managed to keep his composure. He gave a knowing smirk, glancing sidelong at Cara, before replying, "We do. And yes, if the price is right." Saurin nodded slowly, his gaze piercing even behind the mask. He pulled up a chair, never breaking eye contact. "Good. I need safe passage to a planet off this desolate rock." He paused, and even though his voice was even, they could both feel the urgency beneath it. "And I'm willing to compensate you handsomely." Cara, who had been trying to read Saurin, couldn't help herself. "Handsomely, you say? We don't do charity here, friend." Saurin chuckled lightly, reaching into his cloak to pull out a small, ancient-looking token engraved with a Jedi symbol neither Ronan nor Cara recognized. "This alone is worth more than your ship," he said quietly, sliding it across the table. "But there's more if you can get me where I need to go." Cara leaned in, scrutinizing the token as Ronan picked it up, turning it over in his hands. It looked as though it belonged in a museum, not in the grimy cantina of a backwater planet. "All right, old man," Ronan said with a grin, slipping the token into his pocket. "We'll get you off this rock. Just tell us where you're headed." Soren leaned back, his voice dropping. "Take me to the heart of the darkness," he replied, his tone heavy with resolve, "to the place where the Voidborn began." Ronan and Kara exchanged a glance, their lightheartedness fading. They knew the legends, the whispers of worlds swallowed by darkness, and now they found themselves on the edge of a new journey, carrying a stranger with secrets far older than they could guess. "Well then," Kara said with a grin, raising her glass, "to dangerous adventures and fat payoffs. Let's hope we all live to see the credits." And with that, their fates were sealed as they raised their glasses in a toast, unaware of the journey ahead. The morning light was beginning to seep through the rusted metal hull of the ship as Ronan and Kara finalized preparations for takeoff. Kara glanced over at Ronan, smirking as she polished one of the ship's consoles. "I scanned that token he paid us with last night. It's thousands of years old, Ronan, and he wasn't lying. It's worth more than the ship itself." She raised her eyebrows, her eyes gleaming. "If we play this right, this might be a bigger score than Coruscant." Ronan shot her a surprised look. "You're saying we might have stumbled across the last honest person in the galaxy?" They both paused, then burst into laughter, shaking their heads as they echoed together. "Nah." Kara wiped a tear from her eye, still chuckling. Ronan then sobered up and looked at her curiously. "By the way, did you catch his name last night?" Kara paused, giving him a mock-serious look. "Really, Ronan, I only remembered my own name about 2 hours ago, and that was thanks to my name tag." They both doubled over in laughter, their voices echoing through the barren landing zone. Their laughter died quickly, though, as they spotted a cloaked figure approaching from a distance. Kara elbowed Ronan. "It's him. Remember, don't forget to ask his name." As Saurin reached the ship, he noted the pair's quick movements as they made the ship ready. Ronan stepped forward, putting on his best business face. "Ah, our mystery passenger. Hope you've stocked up on those tokens. Might need a few more by the end of this adventure you've signed us up for." Saurin replied with an even voice, as if the concept of bargaining was foreign to him. "There are plentiful amounts. You will be compensated." Ronan nodded, but there was a wary gleam in his eye. "So, you got a name? Didn't catch it last night." "That's because I didn't share it," Saurin replied evenly. "Oh, so that's how it is," Ronan teased, half joking but still probing. Saurin sighed, realizing a name might ease their suspicions. "I am Soren Warde." Instantly, both Ronan and Kara drew their blasters, leveling them directly at Soren's chest. The atmosphere shifted from light-hearted banter to cold tension. Ronan's voice dropped, steely and suspicious. "Who are you really, and how do you know that name? You been following us?" Soren blinked, clearly surprised by their sudden hostility. "Until last night, I'd never seen either of you before," Kara interjected with a disbelieving laugh. "Next, you'll be telling us you've got powers over space and time and you're here to save us all." Soren's eyes narrowed, confusion flickering across his face. "Where have you heard this?" Ronan began to close the distance, his blaster aimed squarely at Soren's head, his tone cold and unyielding. But before he could take another step, a flash of emerald energy cut through the air. In an instant, both Ronan and Kara found their blasters plucked from their hands, floating safely in Soren's grasp. He dropped the weapons to the ground, raising his hands as a gesture of peace. "I mean you no harm," Soren said calmly, his voice firm and sincere. "I am who I say I am, but now I need answers from you." He looked between the two of them, his gaze piercing. "How do you know my name? Tell me now." Kara and Ronan exchanged a stunned glance, the shock etched on their faces. After a tense moment, Ronan broke the silence. He explained that while scavenging a deserted planet called Coruscant, they had come across an ancient 3PO series protocol droid, which informed them of Soren's existence. Ronan went on, telling Soren that they still had the droid in the spaceship's cargo hold. Kara stood there, a stunned expression on her face. "So, you really are this mythical Jedi the droid told us about? Are you here to save us all from the Voidborn?" Soren took a moment to choose his words carefully. "To be totally honest, I don't know. I was only awoken a few days ago, and there is still much for me to learn about this new time. With your help, we'll discover what has truly taken place." With that, Soren removed his mask, bracing himself for their reaction. But it seemed the two scavengers had never seen the leader of the Voidborn before. Kara's response to seeing Soren's face was simply, "You can keep the mask off, handsome," she said with a sly smile. As Soren boarded the ship with Ronan and Kara, his attention was focused solely on the 3PO droid. "Can you take me to the droid, please?" he asked. "I believe it may hold data in its memory banks that could shed light on when this darkness began devouring the galaxy." Ronan led Soren to the cargo hold where the droid was kept. As Soren started examining the protocol droid, he sensed Kara standing close by, watching him with a curious, excited expression. He turned to face her. "Is everything all right? Is there something I can help you with?" he asked, fully expecting a barrage of questions, and he wasn't wrong. As he watched, Kara launched into a stream of questions, firing them off one after another. A thought crossed Soren's mind. He really did feel every one of his 2,000 years of age in that moment. Gently, he raised a hand and calmly asked Kara to slow down. Ronan laughed from the background. "You've just been carried, my friend, don't worry. You'll never get used to it." I just nod and smile like I understand and hope she eventually stops talking. Kara shot Ronan a playful punch on the arm, then continued chattering at light speed. Soren, drawing on an ability he'd had since childhood to calm those around him, projected a soothing influence. "Kara," he said, "I know you have a lot of questions, some might say too many. But if you really want to know about me, there's a quicker way. I can show you, though it might leave you feeling a bit dizzy for a moment." Kara fell silent, perhaps for the first time in a while. Then, with a mischievous smile, she shrugged. "I've been unsteady on my feet since last night. A little more won't hurt." With a slight nod, Soren placed his hand on her head. In an instant, he shared with her memories spanning lifetimes. Kara's face grew bewildered as she absorbed the experiences, eventually sinking to the floor as Ronan knelt beside her, a suspicious look aimed at Soren. "What did you do to her?" he demanded. Soren held up a reassuring hand. "Nothing. She'll be fine. She's just processing a lot of information at once." Ronan leaned closer to Kara. Kara, are you okay? Talk to me." Slowly, Kara looked up at Soren, her eyes alight with awe. "That was incredible," she exclaimed. "Do it to Ronan." Ronan threw his hands up. "I'm good, thanks. Really, I'm good." "What did he show you?" Kara, still dazed but smiling, looked at Ronan with a mix of reverence and excitement. "He showed me enough to know he really is who he says he is. We need to do everything we can to help him." Soren looked at Ronan and Kara with a calming smile. "I'm not afraid to admit that I need your help. I've awoken 2,000 years in a future I know little to nothing about, and now face what seems like an impossible turn of events. If you stand with me, I promise I will do everything in my power to protect you." Kara quickly raised her hand. "I can stop you right there. We're in." Ronan looked at her surprised. "We are?" Kara gave him a quick nudge on the arm and one of those looks that said, "Just nod and agree if you know what's good for you." With that, Ronan turned to Soren and started nodding. "Looks like we're both in." Over the following days, Soren grew to know Ronan and Kara well, learning about their struggles, resourcefulness, and the harsh reality of a galaxy changed beyond recognition. The 3PO protocol droid had filled him in on the devastating emergence of the Voidborn. Their first recorded attack was hundreds of years ago, striking Coruscant. The planet's inhabitants were wiped out in an instant, leaving only the droids behind. With no one left to serve, they simply powered down, the droid explained, leaving Saurin unsettled by the scale of the destruction. Since then, little information had been gathered about the Voidborn, and their presence was a mystery as vast as the void they commanded. Ronan and Kara explained that the Voidborn's attacks had initially only eradicated planetary populations, but over time, entire planets and systems were swallowed by darkness. Ships that dared enter the void never returned. Ronan and Kara had spent their entire lives running from the Voidborn, flying from one abandoned world to the next in their ship, the Starlance, scavenging whatever they could find to keep it operational. The journey had been perilous, and both had lost their home planets and their families. Before they left Mandalia, Saurin had guided them to his hidden ship, a allowing them to collect the rest of his belongings and, to their delight, a large bag of ancient tokens. He smiled as he watched their eyes widen at the trove, but he noticed Kara seemed most intrigued by his collection of armor, particularly the rare, nearly mythical Beskar Mandalorian armor. In this era, Beskar was almost unheard of. Neither Ronan nor Kara had seen it with their own eyes before now, having only ever heard stories of its legendary resilience. Soren couldn't help but admire how well the pair had adapted to the chaos around them. Despite their hardships, they carried themselves with an unbreakable spirit, a resilience he found remarkable, especially considering they were only teenagers themselves. As Soren prepared for their next journey, he knew he'd found two rare souls who could not only help him navigate this new galaxy, but perhaps even stand as a force against the growing darkness. As the Starlings hurtled closer to the dark void of space left by the Voidborn, danger was everywhere. When they dropped out of hyperspace, they were met with a monstrous sight, an enormous, heavily armed warship looming directly ahead. Soren raced to the cockpit, where Ronan and Kara were frozen, staring at the ship's menacing silhouette. "What is that?" Soren demanded. "It's the Dark Marauder," Ronan whispered, fear tightening his voice. "They're scavengers, preying on anyone unlucky enough to cross their path. They've hounded us before, but we've never been this close." Soren's gaze sharpened. "What's the plan?" Kara swallowed and threw a forced smile over her shoulder. "We try to outrun them." Ronan gave a short laugh, more nervous than amused. "If anyone can, it's Kara. She's the best pilot I've ever seen." Soren raised an eyebrow. "And just how many pilots have you seen?" Ronan shot back. "Good question. Buckle in, and you'll find out." A barrage of laser fire interrupted them, striking the Starlance's shields with thunderous intensity. Kara gritted her teeth, fingers dancing over the controls as she threw the ship into a steep dive, just as another bolt grazed their hull. "Hold on!" she shouted, weaving the Starlance in and out of the Marauder's massive structure. The dark ship's cannons fired in bursts, each one exploding dangerously close as Kara banked left, then right, using every ounce of speed the ship had. She dodged a blast so close it sent the entire Starlance lurching sideways, but she pushed through, accelerating sharply. "Kara!" Ronan yelled, gripping his seat. "They're gaining!" Kara glanced back at him, determination in her eyes. "I'm just getting started." She whipped the ship into a tight loop, diving beneath the Marauder's hull and skimming its underbelly. Soren watched in awe, noticing how each move seemed as natural as breathing for her, as if she were tapping into something beyond her awareness. Another volley of fire cut through space, but Kara ducked and rolled the Starlance in a way that seemed almost impossible. Soren felt the force around them, binding him to these two young survivors. The force is with her, he realized, even if she doesn't know it yet. As they narrowly avoided yet another blast, Soren could sense Kara's instincts sharpening with each turn, her timing flawless. With a sudden upward thrust, she aimed straight toward the Marauder's bridge. The move startled their enemies, causing their cannons to falter just enough for her to bank sharply, maneuvering the ship into a swift, evasive arc. In the same breath, she punched the controls, launching the Starlance at full speed. They burst free of the Dark Marauder's range, putting enough distance between them to finally escape. Soren exhaled, both relieved and exhilarated. Kara quickly set the coordinates, and as the stars stretched into lines around them, the Starlance vanished into hyperspace. Soren sat back, a smile tugging at his lips. He had always believed in destiny, but now he felt it more tangibly than ever. Ronan and Kara were no ordinary travelers. They were bound to him in ways that neither of them could yet understand. "Not bad," he said, turning to Kara, who was grinning from ear to ear, heart racing with adrenaline. "Not bad?" she echoed, shaking her head. "I call that a masterpiece." Ronan just laughed, punching her shoulder. "Remind me to never doubt you again," Soren chuckled. "It seems I've found exactly the allies I need. Fate indeed has a way of bringing us where we need to be, even if it takes 2,000 years. After their narrow escape from the Dark Marauder and the revelation of Kara's latent force sensitivity, Soren took some time to meditate, letting recent events settle in his mind. But finding peace aboard the Starlance wasn't easy, especially with Kara around. She was a whirlwind of energy, her curiosity and relentless questions seeming to defy the very concept of sleep. Despite the chaos, Soren felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries: hope. The Force, even after so much time, was still finding a way to restore balance. He thought back to his conversation with his master Theron Voss, who had insisted that the Force's will would outlast even the darkest times. Seated in the cockpit with Ronan and Kara, Soren decided it was time to share his thoughts. "Kara," he began, his voice calm but filled with weight, "I feel the presence of the Force within you. The way you anticipate danger when flying, it's more than instinct. These are traits of the Jedi." Kara froze mid-motion, blinking at him. "Wait, Jedi? You mean like you?" Soren nodded. "Yes, but I've come to realize that I wasn't only brought back to confront the Voidborn. The Force brought me back to rebuild, to guide the galaxy after the darkness has passed. Our destinies were meant to intertwine. You, Kara, are to be my first Padawan in this future I find myself in." For once, Kara was silent, her mouth hanging open in stunned disbelief. Soren couldn't help but savor the rare moment of quiet, though he knew it wouldn't last. And he was right. "Padawan? Me? A Jedi?" Kara exploded, her voice rising with excitement and disbelief. "Do I get a cool robe? Do I get one of those lightsaber things? Wait, how do you even know I can do all that Force stuff?" Soren, anticipating the barrage, simply reached to his side and unclipped his lightsaber. With a calm flick of his thumb, he ignited it. The green blade sprang to life, its hum filling the cabin with a soft, resonant energy. The glow illuminated Kara and Ronan's stunned faces, and for a brief moment, the cockpit felt like a place out of legend. "This," Soren said, holding the weapon up, "is a lightsaber. The chosen weapon of the Jedi. It is more than a blade. It is a symbol. Used correctly, it will protect you and others. It is an extension of the Force itself." Kara's wide eyes sparkled in the green light. "When do I get one of those?" Soren chuckled, deactivating the lightsaber. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. You have much to learn first. Building a lightsaber is a sacred process, a milestone in a Jedi's journey." In the background, Ronan crossed his arms, wearing a slightly disappointed expression. "So, what about me?" Soren turned, his smile kind but measured. "You'll learn everything Kara learns. The Force has a way of surprising us, Ronan. In time, we'll see if it has chosen you as well." Ronan gave a faint grin, clearly placated but still skeptical. "Great. Guess I'll just play back up until then." Soren leaned back, feeling a new sense of purpose settle over him. Teaching Kara, and perhaps even Ronan, was the beginning of a long journey. But for the first time in 2,000 years, Soren Warde felt truly alive. The galaxy was on the brink of chaos, but the Force was stirring once more, and he would see to it that its light endured. Soren sat cross-legged in the quiet of his quarters, the steady hum of the Starlance's engines lulling his mind into a meditative state. But peace was fleeting. Without warning, the Force surged through him, flooding his mind with violent, harrowing visions. Wave after wave struck him, each more vivid than the last. He saw a dark, twisted version of himself standing on a barren world, his arms outstretched as tendrils of shadow drained the life force of an entire planet. The land crumbled into ash, oceans evaporated, and the air itself turned to nothingness. His doppelganger plunged his hands into the planet's surface, siphoning its very essence until the world was no more. All that remained was an empty void, a black scar hanging in the expanse of space. The visions shifted. A battlefield stretched before him, chaos and bloodshed reigning supreme. His dark counterpart led an army of shadowy warriors, each wielding a crimson lightsaber. Their movements were fluid and terrifying, the air thick with rage and despair. Across the battlefield stood a small but defiant group of warriors, the Founders. At their head stood a figure Soren recognized instantly. His father, the Warden of Space and Time, cloaked in radiant energy, wielding a staff of pure light. The two forces clashed, and Soren felt the weight of his father's defiance, but also the inevitable struggle against an enemy that sought to unmake existence itself. Soren's eyes snapped open, his breath ragged. He didn't need to interpret the vision. It was clear. His dark counterpart wanted everything: life, power, time, and existence. He wouldn't stop until the galaxy and beyond were consumed. "He craves the power of the gods themselves," Soren whispered, the gravity of the revelation shaking him. Without hesitation, Soren rose and made his way to the cockpit, where Ronan and Kara were busy adjusting the ship's systems. "I have new coordinates," Soren announced firmly. "We need to go there immediately. It's time I spoke to my father." Ronan froze, his hands stilling over the console. Kara turned in her seat, eyebrows raised so high they nearly disappeared into her hairline. "Your father?" she blurted out. "How does that even work? You're like over 2,000 years old. How old is he?" Soren allowed himself a small smile. "He's as old as time itself." Ronan let out a low whistle, crossing his arms. "So, what? Is he like Father Time or something?" "Pretty much," Soren replied matter-of-factly, his tone carrying a hint of humor. Ronan and Kara exchanged wide-eyed looks, their disbelief palpable. For once, Kara was rendered speechless, and Ronan merely shrugged in stunned acceptance. Soren couldn't help but savor the moment of silence, a rarity aboard the Starlance. But there was no time to lose. The visions were a warning, and the dark tide was rising. His father, the warden of space and time, might hold the answers they desperately needed. As the Starlance adjusted course, Soren closed his eyes, steeling himself for what was to come. Facing his father would be no small task, but the fate of the galaxy, and perhaps existence itself, depended on what the warden could reveal. The next phase of their journey had begun. As the Starlance streaked through hyperspace, the rhythmic hum of its engines provided a calming backdrop to Soren's training sessions with Kara and Ronan. The cargo bay had been cleared to create space for sparring, meditation, and honing their connection to the Force. Kara, however, was proving to be a unique challenge. As Soren sat cross-legged in quiet meditation, Kara fidgeted nearby, tapping her fingers on the floor and sighing every few moments. Ronan, in contrast, had slipped into meditation with surprising ease, his calm demeanor serving him well. "Kara," Soren said, opening one eye, "the Force flows through patience. You must quiet your mind to hear its whispers." Kara groaned. "Quiet my mind? Have you met my mind? It's like a hyperspace lane during a trade rush." Despite the difficulty in meditation, both Kara and Ronan had proven themselves adept in combat training. Their agility and reflexes were remarkable. Both had clearly been unconsciously using the Force for years. Kara's swift strikes and aerial maneuvers were matched only by Ronan's uncanny ability to anticipate attacks before they landed. After another failed attempt at meditation, Kara couldn't hold her thoughts in any longer. She turned to Soren with a look of hesitant determination. "Soren," she began, "can I ask you something?" Soren, sensing her turmoil, gestured for her to sit. "What's on your mind, Kara? Speak freely." Kara hesitated, but then plunged forward. "When you showed me parts of your past, I saw a woman and a boy, your wife and son. What were their names? What happened to them?" The question hit Soren like a sudden blast of cold air. His expression tightened, his eyes distant as if looking at something far beyond the walls of the Starlance. Kara instantly regretted asking. "Their names were Tivara and Theo," Soren said, his voice low and laced with sorrow. They meant everything to me." He paused, his gaze dropping to the floor. "What happened to them is not a story for today, but perhaps one day, when the time is right." Kara nodded solemnly, sensing the weight of his grief. "I understand," she said softly, surprising herself with her restraint. The three sat in silence for a moment, a rare stillness enveloping the cabin. It was Ronan who broke the quiet with a hesitant smile. "So, I'm guessing this means no more meditation drills for now?" Soren looked up and chuckled despite himself. "Not quite, Ronan, but for today, I'll spare you both. Rest up. Tomorrow, we spar again." As Kara and Ronan exchanged grins and headed toward the cockpit, Saurin stayed behind, staring into the emptiness of the cargo bay. In the stillness, memories of Tavara's laughter and Theo's wide, curious eyes came rushing back, bittersweet but undeniable. "Not yet," he whispered to himself, "but one day." The Starlets emerged from hyperspace, the vast emptiness of space surrounding them as the ship slowed to a crawl. Ahead lay their destination, a planet that seemed to shimmer with an ethereal glow, wrapped in a protective energy field. This was the Founder's Sanctuary, a place hidden from the Voidborn's destructive reach. Kara and Ronan joined Saurin in the cockpit, their eyes fixed on the radiant planet before them. "This is it?" Kara asked, her voice tinged with awe. Saurin nodded. "The Founder's Sanctuary, the nexus of their power. If my father is anywhere, it will be here." The ship's systems flickered as an unseen force scanned them. Then a calm voice echoed through the comms. "State your purpose for approaching the sanctuary." Saurin stepped forward. "This is Soren Warde. I seek an audience with the Warden of Space and Time. He is my father." There was a pause, and then the voice replied, "You are expected. Proceed to the designated coordinates." The Starlets descended through the planet's shimmering energy field, the protective barrier parting for them like a curtain. Beneath it lay a lush, vibrant world, filled with towering crystalline spires and rivers of liquid light. The air seemed to hum with power, every breath tingling with the energy of the Force. They landed in a clearing surrounded by immense structures that seemed both ancient and alive. As Saurin, Ronan, and Kara exited the Starlets, Ronan, ever his usual sarcastic self, remarked, "It would have been nice if they'd sent a welcome party to meet us. They are gods, after all." No sooner had the words left his lips than the clouds above began to swirl, shifting and churning with flashes of vibrant colors. Suddenly, bolts of lightning struck the ground before them. When the blinding brilliance faded, they found themselves standing face to face with the Founders. Both Ronan and Kara stood frozen, mouths agape in amazement. At the center of the group was the Warden, his commanding presence undeniable, his piercing gaze locked firmly on Saurin. "Saurin," he said, his voice deep and resonant, "you have returned." Saurin stepped forward, his companions trailing behind him. "Father," he said, his tone a mix of reverence and determination, "the Voidborn grow stronger. Noctis Rathan seeks to unmake everything. I need answers, and your help." The Warden of Space and Time, his father, regarded him with a solemn expression. "You carry the burden of the past, Saurin, and now the weight of the future. But to face what lies ahead, you must confront your own darkness." Saurin frowned. "You mean Noctis Rathan, my doppelganger?" "Yes," his father replied. "He is not merely your counterpart. He is a reflection of your untapped power, corrupted by greed and despair. To defeat him, you must understand him. And to understand him, you must delve deeper into yourself than ever before." Kara, unable to stay silent any longer, stepped forward. "So what does that mean? Some kind of mystical training? Or are we just supposed to wait while he meditates?" The Warden's gaze shifted to Kara, and a faint smile touched his lips. "You are spirited, young one. The Force flows through you in unexpected ways. Your presence here is no accident." Kara blinked, caught off guard by his words, but Ronan stepped in. "Okay, so what do we do now? Just point us at the bad guys, and we'll give it everything we've got." The Warden chuckled softly. "Your courage is commendable, but this battle is not one of strength alone. Come, there is much to discuss." He led them into one of the crystalline spires, its interior glowing with a soft, pulsing light. Within, they entered a chamber filled with floating orbs that displayed galaxies, stars, and otherworldly phenomena. "This is the Great Nexus," the Warden explained. "Here, we can observe the threads of time and space. It will guide us in preparing for what comes next." Saurin stepped forward, his eyes fixed on an orb displaying a swirling darkness devouring star systems. "What do we need to do?" His father placed a hand on Saurin's shoulder. "Prepare yourself, my son. The Voidborn will not wait, and neither will Noctis Wraithen. As the room filled with the hum of the Nexus, Soren felt a deep resolve settle within him. The path ahead was uncertain, but he was not alone. Together, with Kara, Ronan, and the wisdom of the Founders, they would face the coming storm. The Nexus pulsed with an ethereal hum, its power reverberating through the chamber. Soren stood at its center, his hands hovering over the glowing console of swirling energies and crystalline conduits. The knowledge before him wasn't just stored, it was alive, flowing like currents in the Force. Though the sight was new, it resonated deeply within him. Somewhere in the distant echoes of his soul, he already knew how to navigate this omnipotent archive. He closed his eyes and allowed the Force to guide him. Instantly, the Nexus responded. Images began to form, cascading in layers, worlds being consumed by darkness, the rise of the Voidborn, and a figure stepping into clarity, Noctis Wraithen. The dark doppelganger's origins unfolded like a wound reopening, raw and jagged. Soren watched as a splinter of his own essence was corrupted long ago, twisted by an ancient chaotic force deep in the galactic abyss. The fractured Soren was cast into exile, consumed by festering hatred. It was there he encountered the Voidborn, entities that thrived on an insatiable hunger for destruction. Yet, a realization struck him, a profound sense of unease. This feels wrong, Soren thought, like a carefully scripted series of events designed to lead me astray. The conviction deepened. Something was undeniably amiss. Every fiber of his being screamed that he was being fed what was necessary, not what was true. In another chamber, Kara and Ronan followed the Warden with wide-eyed awe. The room stretched endlessly, with racks of glowing weapons lining the walls, each one emanating power so intense it felt alive. "This is it," Kara said, practically bouncing on her heels. "This is the moment where we get galaxy-saving super weapons to wipe out the Voidborn. Right, Ronan?" Ronan smirked and replied, "Only if I get first pick." Before they could start squabbling, the Warden gestured for silence. "You will find more than mere weapons here," he said, his voice tinged with mystery. "These tools of the Founders are not wielded lightly. They will enhance your abilities, test your will, and forge you into what this galaxy needs." The three approached the far end of the chamber where the faint glow of energy intensified. As they turned the final corner, Kara and Ronan froze mid-step. Before them stood towering battlesuits, sleek, luminous constructs etched with runes that pulsed with green light. The designs were unique. One was agile and streamlined, another brutish and heavily armored, and others balanced somewhere in between. For once, neither Kara nor Ronan could find words. They simply stared, jaws agape, as the Warden let the silence linger, clearly enjoying the moment. Finally, Ronan broke the spell, his voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. "You mean, we get to pilot those?" The Warden nodded with a knowing smile. "These battle units, imbued with the power of the Founders, will amplify your strength, instincts, and connection to the Force. But they are not merely tools of destruction, they are extensions of your very being. Choose wisely, for the path you take with them will shape your role in the coming battle." Before the Warden could finish, Kara had already leapt into the cockpit of the most agile suit. As the suit shrunk to fit the user, "Oh, this one's mine. Fits like a glove." Ronan followed quickly, climbing into a more rugged unit, its reinforced plating glinting under the chamber's lights. He tested the controls and grinned, the suit's systems responding instantly to his every thought. This is going to be epic." The Warden chuckled as he stepped back. "I will leave you to familiarize yourselves with the battle units. Remember, they are not just machines. They are a bond with the Founders' will." As the two began experimenting with their suits, a faint hum of activation filled the air. The units synced with their users, glowing brighter with each movement. Kara twirled gracefully in hers, testing its agility, while Ronan stomped heavily, the ground shaking beneath him. Their laughter echoed through the chamber, a rare lightness in the shadow of what was to come. But even as they celebrated, the Warden's gaze turned distant. He could feel the ripples in the Force. Noctis was preparing his next move, and the storm was coming. Saurin exited the Nexus chamber, his mind restless and seeking answers. Things were not as they seemed, and it was time to uncover the truth. As he walked the vast, echoing halls of the Great Nexus, he came upon Ronan and Kara in the armory. Both were clad in intricately designed battle armor, their expressions brimming with satisfaction. Saurin, perplexed by the sight, demanded an explanation. Kara was quick to respond, saying, "Your father, the Warden, gave us these suits to aid in the coming battle with the Voidborn." Questions flooded Saurin's mind. The Founders were never so generous without ulterior motives. After eons of wielding immense power, their gifts often came with hidden strings, woven into games. They played with the living. Suppressing his unease, Saurin left Ronan and Kara behind in the armory and set his sights on the main chamber, where his father awaited. As he approached, the sound of raised voices reverberated through the halls. The heated argument involved the Warden and two other Founders. He slowed his pace, straining to catch the words. A commanding female voice demanded, "Why is my child here?" A second male voice echoed the sentiment, filled with anger and accusation. The Warden's deep tone cut through the argument. "We will discuss this later. My son approaches." As Saurin turned the corner, the two other Founders stormed out, their discontent palpable. The first was a towering female figure, over 10 feet tall, her presence radiating an aura of menace. Her long black hair shimmered with a crimson glow, and her piercing red eyes bore into Saurin, making him feel as though he stood before a Sith Lord in divine form. The second was a male glowing with an emerald light, though his long dark hair and the ornate green armor he wore gave him an air of somber authority. Saurin had never seen such armor before. Its craftsmanship was beyond anything mortal hands could create. When they had passed, Saurin entered the chamber, his father, the Warden, turning to greet him with a calm smile. "I see you've come seeking the truth," the Warden began, his voice steady. "You've surpassed what I imagined you were capable of. You even see through the lies of the Founders themselves." Saurin stepped forward, his purpose sharpened by his time in the Nexus. "What is really going on here, Father? Why am I here, and what deception lies behind the doppelganger Noctis Wraithen? Nothing here feels right. Why were you arguing with those Founders? And why have Ronan and Kara been given battlesuits? There's more to this than meets the eye." The Warden raised his hands in a calming gesture. "You're not wrong, my son. Many things have transpired since we last spoke. Since your creation, a chain reaction of events has unfolded, leading us to this moment. You were the first, an act many Founders believed necessary to alter the universe's destiny. But there were dissenters." He gestured toward the corridor where the two Founders had departed. "Those you just met. Thalindra, the Founder of the Void and Keeper of Secrets, and Lutherian, my firstborn son." Saurin's eyes widened in disbelief. "I have a brother?" "Yes," the Warden replied. "Lutherian was among those who opposed your creation, believing sacred rules had been broken. Since then, a war has raged among the Founders. You must understand, Saurin, that even the gods are flawed. Like mortals, we succumb to weakness. But you're different. You never give in to the darkness. Do you, my son? Much you could teach us." The Warden's voice softened. "Both Lutherian and Thalindra created their own versions of you. It is no accident that Ronan and Kara are here with you. It is by my design. I needed to show them that nothing can be hidden from me." Saurin frowned. "And the battlesuits? Why did you give them those?" "Ah, yes," the Warden said, smiling faintly. "The suits are my creation. They will protect Kara and Ronan in the battle to come, but they are more than that. They were a test. Kara's red suit is imbued with her mother's powers, and Ronan's green suit carries the strength of his father. After they chose, there was no doubt whose children they were." Saurin's mind churned. "And what of Noctis Wraithen?" he pressed. "Is he truly a dark version of me?" The Warden's expression darkened. "The truth of Noctis is far more unsettling. He is, in fact..." Before he could finish, a deafening alarm echoed throughout the planet, accompanied by the sound of massive horns. The Voidborn had arrived. The time of reckoning was upon them all. The air crackled with tension as the founders, Soren, Ronan, and Kara, stepped outside into the sanctuary's courtyard. The sky above was veiled in an ominous shadow, the source of which quickly became apparent. Voidborn ships filled the heavens, blotting out the light and plunging the sanctuary into twilight. The warden stood tall, his green energy flickering around him as a visible shield. He turned to Saurin with a calm, measured tone. The sanctuary's defenses are unassailable. Even Noctis cannot breach them without the power of a founder. Their fleet will falter before the barrier. Saurin, unconvinced, furrowed his brow. Then how did they find this planet? You said it was hidden from all but those invited. Before the warden could respond, an unthinkable sight unfolded before their eyes. The Voidborn fleet descended, effortlessly piercing through the sanctuary's defenses as if they weren't even there. Dozens of ships broke through, then hundreds, until the sky was choked with their presence. A cascade of gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathered founders, their divine composure shaken for the first time in millennia. "This is impossible," the warden muttered, his expression uncharacteristically shaken. As the lead ship of the invasion fleet came into view, Soren's breath caught in his chest. Standing atop the vessel was Noctis Wraithen, his dark silhouette framed by a swirling aura of power. In his grasp was a towering staff, pulsating with golden energy that seemed at odds with the darkness surrounding him. "What is that?" Soren demanded, pointing to the staff. The warden's eyes narrowed, his green energy intensifying into a tempest around him. "He has taken the life of an immortal. That staff belongs to Eltharin, the founder of Equilibrium. It is a weapon imbued with the power to traverse boundaries that were never meant to be crossed. With it, he has breached the sanctuary." Soren's chest tightened as realization dawned. If he can destroy a founder, he could take their power, couldn't he? The warden's face darkened, his energy now glowing brighter, his rage barely contained. Yes, and with each fallen founder, his strength would grow exponentially. The gathered founders erupted into chaos, their once unshakable confidence replaced with fury and dread. Several of them, their divine forms radiating power, leapt into action. Shimmering like meteors, they surged toward the Voidborn fleet in the skies above. But Soren's attention was drawn to the ground below. Emerging from the massive landing ships, wave upon wave of Voidborn soldiers materialized, their armor glinting in the dim light. Hundreds of thousands of them stood in perfect formation, their movements precise and ominous. At their head was Noctis, who now descended from his flagship, the staff in his hand glowing brighter with each step he took. Ronan's voice broke through the mounting tension. "I take it this isn't one of those let's talk it out moments." Kara's hand hovered near her weapon, her voice steady despite the dread in her eyes. "No, this is war." Soren's instincts screamed at him to act, but his mind churned with uncertainty. He looked to the warden, whose glowing form had taken on an almost godlike intensity. "What do we do?" The warden turned to his son, his face grave. "We hold the line. The sanctuary will not fall as long as we stand. But make no mistake, Soren. This will be unlike anything you've faced before. Noctis is no longer merely a shadow of you. He is something far worse." A distant rumble drew their attention to the advancing Voidborn army. The sheer size of it was staggering, a dark tide rolling across the land with Noctis at its head. The staff in his hand sent arcs of golden energy into the ground, and with each pulse, the very air seemed to grow heavier. The warden raised his staff high, its green energy bursting forth like a signal to the heavens. The planet beneath their feet began to rumble with an ancient, resonant groan, the sound carrying across the battlefield. The air around them vibrated with an otherworldly hum, and the Voidborn momentarily faltered in their advance. Soren turned at the sound of gasps from Ronan and Kara. Behind the warden, immense elemental guardians emerged from the earth. Their forms towered into the sky, each a colossus made of the planet's raw essence. The guardians moved with deliberate might, their steps shaking the ground as they strode over the Founder's defensive line. They plunged into the Voidborn hordes, their titanic limbs smashing through the enemy ranks with devastating force, scattering Voidborn like leaves in a storm. Ronan, even in the midst of chaos, couldn't resist a smirk. "What did I tell you, Kara? This was going to be epic. Kara, her eyes gleaming with excitement, replied with a devilish grin. Epic. This redefines the meaning of epic. Shall we? Ronan laughed, drawing his weapon. Oh, we shall. With that, the two charged into the fray, their battlesuits shimmering with power. Ronan's green armor emitted bursts of energy with every strike, while Kara's red suit blazed with fiery intensity, incinerating Voidborn with a sweep of her arm. Together they joined the Founders at the front line, a whirlwind of destruction amidst the chaos. Soren, however, remained still, his eyes fixed on the battlefield. His expression was calm, his focus razor-sharp. He studied the Voidborn movements, noticing how they swarmed in coordinated waves. They weren't random or chaotic. Their attacks were calculated, almost as if anticipating the Founders' moves. Even when the Voidborn fell, Soren observed something unsettling. Their shattered forms began to reassemble, the pieces drawing together like iron to a magnet, and within moments, the reanimated figures rejoined the fight. Then his gaze shifted to the Elemental Guardians. The Voidborn were swarming them as well, hundreds scaling the giants' massive legs like ants, clawing and slicing at their colossal forms. The Guardians fought valiantly, but the sheer numbers of the Voidborn threatened to overwhelm even their monumental power. Soren's attention finally turned to Noctis. He stood at the center of the battlefield, dark energy radiating from the staff in his hand. Waves of crackling electricity erupted from the weapon, striking down anything in his path. Around him, the Voidborn army moved with eerie precision, seemingly connected to his every gesture. Then Soren saw it. Noctis wasn't just commanding the Voidborn, he was controlling them entirely. These were no living creatures. They were mere extensions of his will, dark puppets animated by the power of the stolen staff. Soren's eyes narrowed as realization dawned. To end this battle, Noctis had to be severed from his army. The staff wasn't just a weapon, it was the source of his dominion. Without hesitation, Soren reached for his mask and slid it over his face. The familiar sensation of clarity and purpose washed over him. His hand moved to his lightsaber, igniting the blade with a brilliant green glow that illuminated the battlefield. Power radiated from him, his presence now a beacon amidst the chaos. As Soren joined the battle, a deep calmness washed over him. In the midst of the chaos, his focus was unparalleled, his senses sharper than ever. With his connection to the Force, he could already see the path he would need to take to Noctis. He knew where the Voidborn would strike even before they moved. His movements were precise, a perfect dance of strategy and power. With one last glance at the Warden, who was commanding the Elemental Guardians, Soren became a blur of green light, redefining what was possible in the art of warfare. He was more than just a Jedi now. He was a force of nature. His green lightsaber blazed as he carved through hundreds of Voidborn in the blink of an eye, green electrical energy sizzling through the air and scorching the battlefield. Each strike was calculated, swift, and deadly. The Voidborn barely had time to react before they were struck down, their forms collapsing in a heap. Meanwhile, Kara and Ronan were making easy work of their enemies. Their battlesuits enhanced their abilities, giving them heightened senses and unmatched speed. The Voidborn had no chance against them as they tore through the battlefield side by side. For a brief moment, Kara caught sight of Soren in the distance. Her heightened senses allowed her to witness his assault in slow motion. She saw the way he moved, deflecting attacks, evading blows, and cutting down Noctis's dark disciples with fluid precision. It was as if Soren were everywhere at once, a force unstoppable. He blurred from one Voidborn to the next, his strikes an unrelenting storm. In awe, Kara stopped in her tracks, momentarily mesmerized by his skill. Then, Ronan's voice cut through her concentration. "Are you taking part in this battle, or are you just going to stand there with your mouth open?" Kara smirked, her gaze never leaving Soren. "I was just letting you catch up," she jibed, then rejoined the battle with renewed determination. Soren, now in the heart of the enemy lines, pressed forward with relentless precision. As he breached another defensive line, he saw something in the distance. Lutharion, the Warden's son, had reached Noctis. The clash of their powers created a blinding flash, and the raw energy of the confrontation reverberated across the battlefield. Soren seized the moment, moving ever closer to his target. But just as he was about to close the distance, the light that had blazed from the collision of Lutherian and Noctis dissipated. Standing over the fallen body of Lutherian, Noctis grinned darkly. His hands plunged into the Founder's chest, drawing all the light and power from him. The battlefield fell silent for a brief moment. The Warden's voice, full of sorrow and rage, echoed across the land. His battle cry was deafening, no longer commanding the elemental guardians, but charging into battle himself. With a single leap, he descended, causing a sonic boom as he landed, obliterating thousands of Voidborn in his wake. Saurin, ever attuned to the ebb and flow of battle, found himself face to face with Noctis. Their powers collided with an almost tangible force, canceling each other out. Saurin's ability to freeze time, so easily wielded against others, was rendered useless in Noctis's presence, and the same went for Noctis. They stood locked in place, the energy between them crackling. To Saurin's surprise, Noctis smiled, a twisted, victorious grin. "At last I have you," he sneered, his voice dripping with malice. With a flick of his wrist, Noctis brought the staff of Eltharin down on the ground, causing shockwaves to ripple outward. In an instant, the world around them shifted. Gone were the thousands of Voidborn, the Founders, and the dark ships that had blotted out the sky. The battle faded into the distance as Saurin found himself in an entirely different realm. The air was thick with dark energy, and before him stood Noctis, crackling with raw, untapped power. The Warden, Kara, Ronan, and the other Founders stood in disbelief. The armies of Voidborn, the dark ships, everything had vanished the moment Saurin made it to Noctis. Kara was the first to speak, her voice filled with realization. This was all done to get to Saurin. Saurin's heart pounded in his chest as he stood in the realm with Noctis, the weight of the situation sinking in. He had been lured here, his very existence part of the dark strategy to bring him face to face with his ultimate adversary. But now, more than ever, he understood what he had to do. The final confrontation had begun. Noctis raised his staff and the air around them thickened with the weight of the moment. There was no turning back.
Dear friends, I'm thrilled to announce that I've taken a step closer to turning my passion into a full-time pursuit. I've created a Patreon account where you can directly support my work and help me bring more of the stories you love to life. By joining me on Patreon, you'll gain access to exclusive content, including downloadable images from my Star Wars What If series and exciting new material about the legendary Jedi Sentinel, Soren Warde. Your support means the world to me, not just as a creator, but as someone who dreams of dedicating every moment to crafting these epic tales. I know I can't achieve this dream without you, and I'm deeply grateful for every bit of encouragement and support you've given me so far. If my stories have sparked your imagination and you'd like to see me dedicate all my energy to creating even more, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you for being part of this journey. Together, we can bring these worlds to life like never before.
Saurin stood, his breathing steady despite the storm of emotions raging within him. Across from Saurin in the ethereal realm, Noctis paced like a caged animal, the air around him crackling with uncontained energy. The fallen staff of Eltharin lay at his feet, tendrils of dark power spilling from his form and saturating the air. Saurin raised his lightsaber, its green glow steady against the oppressive dark, waiting for Noctis to strike. But the attack didn't come. Instead, Noctis turned to face him, his wild eyes betraying the madness clawing at his mind. The overwhelming power he had absorbed from Lutherian was destabilizing him, pushing him to the brink of insanity. Saurin realized the truth. Noctis's strength was also his greatest weakness. His body couldn't handle the power coursing through it. Noctis stopped pacing, his cruel grin returning as the energy around him seemed to coalesce. "Now, that's better," he said, his voice laced with malice. The energy radiating from him created two shimmering specters, each a shadowy likeness of himself, as if his essence was tearing apart. Saurin kept his stance calm and measured, his eyes locked on his foe. "What do you want, Noctis, or whatever you are? You have my full, undivided attention." Noctis laughed, a sound so sinister it made Saurin's skin crawl. "They told you I'm a dark version of yourself, didn't they? A broken fragment of your timeline made monstrous by circumstance. Lies. All of it. Noctis took a step closer, his voice rising with anger. The Founders have ruled the universe for so long that their only entertainment now is manipulating the living, twisting fates to suit their cruel games. And you're the worst of them. Soren didn't flinch. His focus was unshakable, though every word from Noctis demanded answers. I've fought to preserve the balance of the Force, to protect the innocent. Balance? The Force? You're a fool, Noctis sneered, stepping closer. I am not you. I am your son. The revelation struck like a thunderbolt. Soren's composure faltered, his voice barely above a whisper. Theo? Noctis smiled wickedly. Ah, is that what you called him in your timeline? His life force was delicious. Soren's chest tightened. What have you done? Do you even understand? Noctis hissed. When you impregnated Tevara with your founder's seed, you doomed her. In countless timelines, a child was born. Your child. In many, Tevara was cast out, branded a liar for her immaculate conception. I am the product of one such life. A life of rejection and suffering. Now I stand before you to claim my revenge. Soren's heart ached, but he couldn't afford to dwell on the past. Noctis ignited his lightsaber, the crimson blade a blazing symbol of his fury. Once I drain your power, nothing will stop me from ending the Founders. Soren forced himself to focus, setting aside the emotional turmoil. This was no time for hesitation. As Noctis charged, their lightsabers clashed, sending shockwaves across the strange realm. Their battle was a symphony of raw power and honed skill. Noctis fought with unrelenting aggression, his strikes hammering like a tempest. Soren countered with precision and fluidity, his every movement a testament to years of training and adaptability. Time seemed to stretch as the duel raged, each combatant testing the other's limits. Soren's sharp mind began to notice the cracks. Noctis had relied too long on overwhelming power and manipulation, never honing the endurance or technique necessary for an evenly matched battle. His attacks grew wilder, his energy faltering under the strain of Soren's calculated defense. When Noctis lunged in a final frenzied assault, Soren parried the attack and used the cortosis hilt of his lightsaber to temporarily short out Noctis' blade. Dropping low, he spun with a single devastating strike. His lightsaber sliced through Noctis, who collapsed to his knees, the power draining from his form like water from a shattered vessel. Soren stood over him, his lightsaber still glowing. Then he knelt beside Noctis, his voice low and cold. "What did you do to my son?" Noctis gasped, clutching his side as raw energy leaked from him. "You'll never know. The truth dies. With me." But Soren wasn't ready to let him go. Placing his hand on Noctis's face, he reached out with the Force, delving into the fragmented memories of the fallen being. In an instant, he saw everything, the truth of Theo's fate and the suffering endured in countless timelines. When he pulled back, the last remnants of Noctis' dark power faded, and the realm collapsed. Soren found himself back on the sanctuary battlefield. The air was still, the silence deafening, the weight of what he had learned threatening to crush him. A single tear slipped down his face as he whispered, "Theo." "Soren!" Kara's voice broke the silence, filled with relief and joy. She and Ronan sprinted toward him, their faces alight with hope. Ronan grinned. "Told you he'd be fine." Kara babbled excitedly, recounting everything that had happened in his absence. Soren managed a small smile, standing and removing his mask. "You two have done more than I could have ever asked. I'm proud of you both," Ronan smirked. "So, do I qualify as a Jedi now?" Soren chuckled, the weight of his sorrow momentarily lifting. "Not quite yet, but one day you both will be. It's time for the Jedi Order to be reborn, but this time, the right way." As the trio walked toward the remaining Founders, Soren began to speak. "But before we rebuild, I need to tell you the story of my son, Theo.